Today, I'm just curious. I'm joined by Nicole Castillo, Vice President of Strategic Products at News Corp, where she leads AI strategy across some of the world's biggest content and information businesses. But Nicole's also a writer, a mom, and a creative force of nature. In this episode, we'll explore how she blends AI into both her professional and personal life, from vendor vetting and business model strategy to writing Substack posts and bedtime stories with ChatGPT. Learn how she's building an AI ROI framework to cut through the noise of vendor hype, how she's piloting tools with the real benchmarks for success, and how she uses AI daily, from streamlining finance operations to fast-tracking LinkedIn posts. Nicole, welcome to Just Curious.
I am very happy to be here, and I'm very curious how this conversation's going to go.
Appreciate your use of curious. Um, Nicole, your bio calls you the Mary Poppins of product. Can you tell us the story behind that nickname and how it connects to your AI journey?
Sure. So Mary Poppins of Product happened shortly after I joined News Corp. I don't even remember the like exact moment, but I remember seeing something that caused me to be like, oh, that's totally me. I texted my old boss and was like, isn't this me? And he's like, totally. And it sort of stuck. And I leaned in really hard because it really is. I think everyone, when they think of Mary Poppins, they're like, oh, delightful. There's something about her that like you think is fun, but she's a little like hard edged, but like in a good way, like the best ways. And she has that magical bag of tricks, and she just brings a lot of spoonful of sugar and supercalifragilisticexpialidocious to everything. And I feel like that's totally me. Like I feel like if I can slip in a long word like that into any meeting. And it just is really, I think, part of being scrappy, part of being creative, part of being curious about the world and bringing people on that journey. She brings these children along. I bring people, stakeholders along with me on the magical journey that is, creating wonderful products.
Curiosity and creativity, obviously helpful when you're looking at something new like AI. Tell me how you got involved in helping News Corp understand and build a strategy to use AI.
Sadly, accidentally. But I think it ultimately worked out, and there's a reason for it. I had actually just come back from my maternity leave for my second child, my beautiful son, and things had changed. I'd actually hired to lead mobile products, and I came back and I was like, I'm looking to have more impact, do more things, and it was like, well, this new thing, AI, has become more of a thing. Why don't you step into that? And so I started leaning into what do we do with AI? And much of my initial first steps were like just like uncovering the hype. It's like you're trying to like, oh, is that real? Is that interesting? Is that important? Is that important for us, for our business? And so I got the chance to really fall into it. But I think, especially today, where so much of the impact of AI is on people and is on experiences, I'm not saying it's less about the tech. There is definite need for data scientists and for people who have this really deeply technical skill to build these things. But so much of today is the democratization of AI and how people will use it. And I think product leaders, people leaders are ones to really help lead this new journey of AI for themselves, for their companies, for people within organizations.
Yeah. Why do media companies care about AI? And when I think about AI, obviously, and I believe News Corp and Dow Jones have been investing in AI for a long time. But when we're thinking about the next generation of AI, the generative AIs, the agentic AIs, the combination of traditional AI with new AI, why do media companies care about this future of AI?
Well, I think regardless of media or not, everyone should care because I think those who aren't moving into AI or aren't at least thinking about it are going to be left behind. I think media companies are more sensitive to it. There is obviously an IP angle to this. Large language models are powered by massive amounts of content to make them good, and many of them have already used much of the content that is sort of out there. And so, whatever new content is important to lead the next wave of great AI solutions and models. So I think media companies have this really important role to play in the future of how AI models get built and how they are getting better and how they'll really embed into the world. So I think, but regardless, I think every company should consider AI as an important part of where they take their business. Now it could be generative, it could be something else, but I think everyone should be deeply curious about how AI could impact their companies.
Yeah. You work in a business with many business units. How do you coordinate AI strategy across so many brands and businesses, especially when priorities can differ?
Much like everyone who has jobs that are like herding cats with great care and intention. Well, I think, we are in a really unique organization where not only do we have these amazing news brands, but we have real estate, we have book publishing. And like you said, there are different business needs that drive each of those businesses. Even within the news businesses, there's different, business models. And much of what it is I'm a big connector. I connect the teams and the people that are doing one thing and say, by the way, do you know that this group is doing it and they're doing it really well? And connecting those people and making sure that they're aware, because ultimately we don't want duplication of, if something is done really well, you want to share that. And that's the benefit of working in a large organization such as News Corp, is somebody can take the lead and prove out it's successful, or prove something not successful, and share the lessons learned for that journey, or share the teaching. So even, one of our smaller business units who might be able to do more bleeding edge things with some of the AI models that some others cannot, can still share, oh, I had a lot of friction. For instance, sensitive content. Many of the models have protection or guardrails against sensitive content, but news content has sometimes sensitive topics. And so how do you get and work with models when some of those things are restricted? So those are like little small lessons that I heard that in this one meeting with this one business unit, and I managed to kind of help feed and filter that through the businesses. So it's creating that connective tissue more than it is, you know, pushing down a centralized mission and vision. We do have guardrails and principles in place on how to, as a whole, work and exist within kind of how you build and use AI. I don't think there's any benefit to sort of like having a strong restriction on, businesses leaning in and figuring out what works for them either.
Yeah. What have you learned in terms of the best ways to facilitate sharing? Do you have a, Slack channel and people are just dropping ideas in there? Do you set up, monthly stand-ups where people are encouraged to share learnings? Like how, especially in a big organization, a
Yeah.
global organization, how do you get those learnings from like the small company here to the big unit there? Ensure that like all those learnings are leveraged across, the entire organization.
That's a great question. And I feel like it's not a cookie cutter approach to everything. One thing that I really struggled with when I first kind of started taking this over is like, who do you invite to a meeting on AI? If you think about that and you think about like, hey, let's do a big global AI meeting, it's almost impossible. Because if you think about it, you have people that are just generally interested in AI and want to be there, want to listen, want to learn. There's people that have specific business cases, but you might have a finance business case, and then you have, a newsroom business case, and they may not be like, there's maybe some things to share, but also it's kind of like maybe that person will be bored by this particular topic. And then there are practitioners, people that want to go deep and technical and like nerd out on the latest paper they're reading. And so putting all those people in a room and curating an agenda for that breadth of audience is nearly impossible. So what I found, I have a couple different things that I've deployed. Is one is I have like a global newsletter that goes out internally where I kind of curate, here's what's happening in the business, here's what's happening in industry, here's what's happening, kind of broad themes. I'll kind of pick and rotate different things. And that serves to those, that are on the distribution list. It's from kind of some very senior executives to people, again, that are just deeply curious about AI. Then they get kind of a swath. And I was doing that I did that for a year weekly because the pace of things that were moving so fast. Then I changed to biweekly, and now we're at monthly because I do have to maintain some sanity.
Right.
I've put together like AI community as a practice with a more technical audience to kind of really, again, get into more technical discussions. I've led workshops in different cases, depending on the need and the subject. I just recently helped the finance team, and I went with them to do a global hackathon on AI. And so I don't think there's a one size fits all. And I definitely don't think it's possible to curate like for an organization as big as ours and as many people who are now involved with AI or just interested, it's almost impossible to put them all in a room and do one session that hits all the points from like an executive view to a practitioner, builder view, and to just anyone who's interested. So I think you got to hit on a bunch of different levels, a bunch of different avenues. And then sometimes you've got to pause some that, from an overhead may not make sense to continue at a certain pace and find ways to get the message out. And sometimes it's just really, like I said, connecting people to people. I literally had somebody email me last night from Australia. And it was like, hey, can you just connect me to, do you have a list of all the people who are working at the business on AI? And can you connect me to those people? And I said, well, do you want technical people? So this is kind of how
Right.
I framed it already. Like, is it technical people? Is it business people? Like, is there a certain like type of thing that you want to know or learn? So I had to ask those questions so that I could say, oh, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to this person first. Because if it's a business person, here and immediately send an email and was like, hey guys, get together. So sometimes it's literally just one-on-one connections, and that is part of what I bring is this kind of collaboration connectivity to what I do and how I deploy strategy.
Whether it's in finance or the newsroom or some other part of News Corp, is there an approach to identifying the best use cases for AI?
This one is so tricky for me because I really struggle with when we were just really starting out and it's like, what are our best low hanging fruit use cases? And I sort of struggle because it always feels like cart before horse, right? And it's like, okay, well, what are just the biggest problems in our business, regardless of whether or not they can be solved with AI? Because half the time, or more than half the time, just sticking AI onto something is not the solution. Or maybe it's traditional ML AI and not Gen AI. And so I feel like sometimes there is a too much of a lean into let's solve it with AI, where the question should be, what are our biggest problems, or what are the problems that we need solutions for now that are really causing our business to lose money or be inefficient, or that we could see growth. So I think it's hard to say what are the best business cases for use cases for AI. Although I think we've seen as a general trend, there are some ones that broadly have been easily applied. So like customer service, knowledge management, like those type of things. Like we're seeing those use cases with Klarna and OpenAI, like what they did. And you're seeing, stories about AI generated coding as different businesses leaning like X percentage of our code is now done by AI. And we're seeing kind of shifts and trends in those places. But I can't say enough about how just identify your problems first, understand the processes and the people impacted by those processes, and the metrics around it. Because I think too, and we'll probably get to this later, is like you have to understand the time something takes now, or the amount of money that is spent, or the amount of people that do X work to understand the value add of a solution, so that when you get to, hey, we've tried something, we've piloted something, you can say definitively, we're seeing X% savings in time or accuracy, etc. So that's a very long explanation for, yes, there are some tried and true use cases that I think are definitely hitting across the board, but I think most businesses should start with just what are your biggest problems.
Yeah. And let's say you've identified a problem. Is there a way to prioritize those problems that are worth solving with AI versus
Mm.
those that are better handled by process or policy? How do you go from that
Yeah.
problem to, okay, let's actually, this is a good fit for AI?
So this one, again, is a tangled web. You ask very complex questions that I'm going to have a complex answer for. So in terms of, I mean, I do think being pretty methodical of understanding the time something takes, I think, depending on the type of technology, if there was a really great use case I saw recently where regulatory things that come out, quarterly regulatory, is your company compliant with this regulation? So you have to scan all these really dense compliance documentation, and then you have to understand the company. Does the company need to meet any of these criteria? And then you have to kind of provide recommendations because you're reviewing text, and there's a lot of time that a person would have to go through to read and understand that text. And then the output is a text-based output,
Mhm.
right? That's like yes, no kind of qualification. And then a natural language description of what action would you need to take as a company to be compliant. Like to me, like that one just made so much sense. And you can then understand how much would a single person need to do to each quarter scan these reports, how many reports are there. So I think there's ones that just, I don't know, make sense. But you mentioned people and process. I think on the flip side, when it comes to developing whatever solution to the problem, and if AI was the recommended solution, even if those metrics match, so say in this case you can save a team of, reviewers and 50% of their time by giving them a set of Gen AI tools, which will scan X amount of documents and save them so much time. And then all they have to do is review the outputs, make sure they're okay. The problem I really still see is the change management
Mm.
and the people side of adopting these tools, because I use this phrase a lot. People are comforted by their pain, or like comfortable with their pain. Is like, I know that sometimes I'm not the most efficient person when it comes to doing a task, but I know how to do this in my way. And for me to change and adapt to like going to this new system, learning these new things, even if I know it will eventually save me time, I have to go through this learning process, which most people, are a little bit skeptical. Oh, will this change me time? Like, so I really do think that even if you prove out that something is a good use case, you build the right thing, people are often forgetting the change management and the people adoption side of like successful implementations of technology, especially in this Gen AI world. So, my word of caution to all, don't forget about the change management. Don't forget about the adoption, the training needed to bring people along the journey. Because if you're not bringing them along, you're going to build something, you're going to spend a lot of money, and it's not going to have the added value you thought it was.
Yeah. When it comes to change management, are there like some key learnings that you've accrued over the last couple of years? You mentioned, training and education and bringing people along. If you had to distill like your philosophy on change management into one answer to a question, what would it be?
think I think it would be bringing people on the journey. Like involve people early and get their input early. Because I think if you think about a user group, or like let's just say in a hypothetical world, because this never happens, an executive gets in their head that they want to do something and they think it's a great idea, and they tell a tech team or whatever team, build this thing, it'll be great. And they build it in a silo, in a vacuum, because right, the CEO is asking, and like that's a natural inclination to. But if you forget to involve the end users who would be responsible for then using said tool, you've missed the mark. And ultimately they're probably going to have, like, I think about like a bot, like an organ transplant, they're probably going to reject the organ or the
Yeah.
tool, right? Because they're like, it's incompatible with my system. Now it might be, but it's you didn't prep the body, you didn't test the blood work, you didn't check that all the vitals were stable before you inserted this new thing into their work body. And so now they're like, no, no, it's poison. let's shut this shit down. So, like I went weird to the metaphor place right there, but hopefully it struck a chord. We went to a
Yeah,
weird place, but I think we got to a point.
I like it. We're going to talk a little bit about how you vet AI pitches, but maybe before we do, how do you think about the decision between building internally or bringing in a vendor when it comes to AI initiatives?
You know, it's funny because I don't think anything's really changed. Kind of the same way about like use cases in terms of the build versus buy. Like this is a old problem of all, tech builders in a company. So I think you want to build things that are, let's see, closest to your core business, I guess. Now, it doesn't have to be wholly built and bespoke. Like there are great partners with, that we kind of build and augment on top of. But I think with build versus buy, I think it's really making sure if you're buying something, how much of it, the thing that you're buying, needs to be unique or nuanced for your business and how much doesn't. Because what I've seen is people say, okay, yeah, I want that tool. It's 80% of what I need. 20% will build on this special thing. Sometimes that 20% costs twice as much of that out of the box thing that you built. And then you have to replace that because now you've almost made them incompatible. So I think it's just really thinking about the full solution that you want to see. And then also, do you have the right resources? I think in the age of AI, you know, the top talent is going to places like OpenAI, Google. And so, there are really talented data scientists out there and that can help you build within your company. And we do have some really amazing data scientists. Um, but how much can they even build? Because we have a small percentage of those people. So how much are they building uniquely? Are they leveraging other tools? So I think it's still ways to have. I don't have a perfect answer for that one, but I think every company needs to be wary of, you know, what comes out of the box, I guess, and
Yeah.
how much. I guess my biggest piece of advice though is to urge people that do buy something is really make sure the out of the box, that 80%, maybe really question whoever's asking for that 20% special extra. What's the value of that 20%? And can you just use the out of the box? Because I would guarantee that that 20% is going to slow you down and it's going to make it harder to maintain. It's going to make it more complicated in the long run. So try to just use it out of the box. If you're going to buy it, just use it as is. Now, that's an oversimplification because obviously you will need some special things depending on your business, but lessons learned from
Yeah.
some experiences.
Let's talk about out of the box solutions. You must get a lot of AI pitches. Tell me a little bit about the process you've developed to separate the signal from the noise.
I'll give a story first, and it may not be the nicest one about me, but I was in a vendor demo, and about maybe 10 minutes in, I got some slideware, and then they started demoing me an HR chatbot. And I feel like I've seen a lot of HR chatbots as like, here, let us show you what we can create. And I immediately was like, you need to show me something else because this just isn't going to work for me. I've seen it. I get you can create one, but I need you to show me something different because everyone's pitched that to me. So I guess that's a roundabout way of saying that I often go into a room with most vendors as being one of the most skeptical people about why are you here? What are you trying to sell me? Do you have something that we really need? Or are you just putting up some vaporware? But also, I am one of the most optimistic people about the potential of AI and it being transformative. So if you show me something that I think can have impact, I will get excited and I will, try to socialize that across the board. But I get very tired of, seeing things that have sort of, oh, we've made this for somebody else and, you could use it. I'm like, you don't really understand our business. So one thing is if somebody's gonna, come to a meeting with me and my team, I can pretty much tell within, it's sort of like doing a job interview with an intern.
Yeah.
If they can't show that they understand your company, they're probably not gonna be worth working with. So if somebody is just spending, 10 minutes of just, you know, probing me for my company, if you haven't done some homework, that's a concern. I also heard a story from a coworker who had gone to this vendor meeting. It's supposed to be an AI workshop, and she got there and was like, okay, what are the AI parts? And they literally just told her, oh, it's not really AI. We just called it. And so, I do think level setting with people. I see. I also do this a lot with vendors is understand the vernacular. So I see a lot of people using agentic, and agents and agentic is still somewhat fuzzy around the edges. So I'll get into a call and be like, what do you mean by agents? Like, give me your definition, because I'm not saying that like my definition of agent is unchanging and static, but I want to make sure that we're speaking the same language and have the same vernacular when it comes to, approaches and solutions, with AI. So those are some things that I deploy. Maybe, I don't know, is it mean to tell somebody not to show me an HR chatbot? Should I? I'm not
I mean, if
talking
you don't
about
need
story
it,
anymore.
if you don't need it, just
Yeah.
being honest.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about, and you touched on this earlier in our conversation, about ROI and the importance of ROI when it comes to whether it's a vendor that you're purchasing software from or it's something you're building. Tell us a little bit about kind of how you think about ROI and if there's a framework that you've developed to assess it.
So I think one thing that I am deeply conscious of is while AI and the models are getting less expensive every day, right? So the model cost, you know, gets tenfold decrease in price, fairly rapidly. AI solutions are still very expensive to implement. And not only that, what I'm seeing is that if, for instance, you have a team that wants to build, let's use an HR chatbot, just as an example, wants to build an HR chatbot, and they get, sold by a vendor, and they're like, this, we're going to build it for you, it's going to be great. I'm always making sure people understand that, okay, yes, I understand this will save you time. How much is it going to cost you to build it? How much is it going to cost you to maintain it? How often do you need to, update the model? How easily can you update the model? Do you have an ability to move to a lower cost model, but not lose any of the quality? These are all things that like
Yeah.
people are still trying to unpack and understand. So I think in terms of mapping it to a framework, I think one, deeply understanding how your business makes money and measures money, measures money. We all measure money with like dollars and cents, but measures value is really important. So like for instance, like subscriptions are a big part of our business. And so understanding what drives subscription growth, and then subscription growth in terms of equal value, like then you can map a solution directly to those business drivers.
Right.
So mapping these things really in specifically, or, if there's business functions, like more on the cost saving. So subscriptions might be more of a revenue generating model, right? So that's where you would want to make sure whatever your solution that's driving revenue maps very specifically back to, are we increasing subscription growth, and can we show the math essentially?
Yeah.
And then if you're looking at something that's more cost savings, again, you need to understand the people and the processes behind that to a really specific degree. You need to sit with the teams and get your little calculator out or get your spreadsheet out and say, okay, I've got this amount of people who are analyzing this amount of content, or and then that are spending, and they cost X amount to have that and then to understand with the solutions how you can bring that cost down. So you have to do a pretty intensive mapping to get it right, because I think without that intention, it's just sort of like a crystal ball, and you're like, well, I hope the subscribers will come. I hope the cost savings will come. And I think that's unfortunately, not the smartest way to do business, but I think we're all trying to get there.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about your writing. You write a lot.
Yeah, I do.
Tell us about how AI shows up in your creative workflow.
That's a great question. I have like all these ideas. I feel like I am that person who has like a million thoughts and would, until recently, sort of be like, I want to write a book or I want to write something. But, it takes a lot more sit down time, a lot more capacity than I thought I had. With having AI tools at my disposal, I can sort of take like an inkling of a thought, or I do this a lot where I'm listening to an audiobook and I'm like, oh, I love this quote. And I'll take a quote and I'll maybe throw it into ChatGPT and I say, like, I really love this. And I'll kind of word vomit like what I'm thinking about or what I'm feeling that this makes me think of, how it excites me. And I'll either like just maybe ask it like, hey, draft a LinkedIn post that I might, be able to share this because I want to share this. Or I use it a lot. I'm writing a series on organizational intelligence, and so I'll be driving back from dropping my kids off from school, and I'll use the voice to text, and I'll be like, I just had an idea for a chapter, blah 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 blah, and again, just plop it in as sort of, for now, like okay, let me get the ideas out in a space. So ChatGPT has become somewhat of a notepad for me of just all these stray thoughts that I can now figure out how to focus them into an intent or share kind of the little piece of like Nicole's brain or like what I'm reading or what I'm thinking, and how I'm seeing and framing the world that I didn't feel like I could as quickly or as elegantly before. I still take a lot of time to take that kernel of a thought, put it in ChatGPT and edit it quite a bit to still have the essence of, what is Nicole. Because I see people post, there's so much AI slop out there. There's so many LinkedIn posts that are all AI generated. And I believe that, everything I still put out there, whether I used AI to help me, is still my original thought. I had to think about it, listen to it, hear it, put it into an AI chat and converse back. I often have like several versions that I converse even in a chatbot before I even bring it into like, a Word doc and then further refine it. And then I'll put it in LinkedIn. I'll maybe do a final polish. So it takes a lot to kind of get it there, but it just feels like it gets me there faster. And I have like almost like a friend or a coach or somebody to kind of bounce ideas off, that before I felt like I had to sit in my own silence, my vacuum of Nicole, and sort of hear my own echoes and not get further than that little nugget.
Yeah. I was gonna ask you like the difference between AI slop and
Mm,
using AI to enable your own creativity. And it sounds like using it, as people have said, as a thought partner or as a coach. I'm kind of curious, what does that look like in practice? Are there like some prompts that you use that you could share that help take that nugget and turn it into, with a lot of your own perspectives, into
yeah.
a kind of like high quality content piece?
So I use a lot of different things and I use a lot of different features within some of the tools. So I'll use projects in, ChatGPT or Claude to kind of set up and give it samples of my own writing that I've done before. I also I'm a less is more prompter. So I'll sometimes just, put in a quote, give it some instructions, see what it comes out with. Maybe I like it, maybe I don't. Be like, no, you didn't really strike a chord there, or I'll take it offline. I'll edit it a little bit, throw it back and be like, and now polish this. So I don't have a one set technique. I will also bounce between tools. So for instance, I might brainstorm a concept for a chapter in ChatGPT. I might do kind of the initial like draft in Claude because I think the writing style is a little bit better, but then I might go fact check myself in ChatGPT because sometimes Claude makes up quotes or it'll make up stories of people like or interactions that I've had and I'm like, no, we're not going to do that. Sometimes I'll put it into Substack. I'll do all my edits, throw it back in, so and sometimes I'll put in chunks, sometimes I'll put in a full long form. I don't have like a tried and true method. I try a lot of different things. Some of them work out. Sometimes I love this one LinkedIn post. Just add some emojis. Like,
Yeah.
like that's one because, I'm just like, yeah, I need it to, look a little different. Or I'll, ask it, to leave space to call people out. So I'll know kind of where I need to insert because it can't do some of that, obviously. But yeah, I maybe don't have the most refined approach, but I have fun with it and I don't take it or myself too seriously.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like the key there is that it's iterative and that it's not just
Very much
ask
so.
and answer and use. It is like ask and take and consume and think and
Yeah.
refine and create and ask again and so on and so forth.
Yeah. No, I think that's so my perfect piece of advice now that you've really brought this to life is don't ever take the first draft. Like try at least one more draft. You still might go back to one of the first ones or take a piece from this, a piece from that, but never take the first draft and just post it or use it on its own because then I do think it loses a bit of the you or the humanity because you still had to give it the initial prompt to get that far, but I feel like you got to iterate.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to end with some practical advice, a few questions that hopefully, you know, leverage some of your experiences and learnings. And the first is around product. What's one way that product leaders can start using AI meaningfully today if they're not already?
I mean, I think for product leaders, so much of what we do is sort of written discourse, whether it's a email to stakeholders or it's prepping a strategy deck. I think it goes back to the advice that I just gave on how to prompt is use it as a collaborator. So the same way as you'd be like, you might have a first draft of an email and you're just like, is this striking the right chord? Throw it into your company approved AI tool and say, like, is this giving the right sentiment? Like, cross check yourself. Or if you would normally, I remember years ago before I would send like a very important stakeholder email or have to, send something to a cranky stakeholder, I would have like a coworker, like over my shoulder, be like, hey, can you read this one time? So think about it as the same thing, the same way you would work with a colleague to sort of collaborate or to brainstorm. You can do that now. Like imagine, or even use it as your first draft, then take it offline. So I think it's just using it. I think the only other piece of advice I would give is be skeptical about does this product and or solution um, need Gen AI? Does it need just a new process? Because I do think a lot of people are jumping to must have an AI feature. Don't think that's always the right use case or the right implementation is to just jump straight to that. So be skeptical, but use it all the time. I feel like I'm giving mixed messages, but in the right way.
Yeah. Um, I would love to talk lastly about creativity. You've used the term AI amplified creativity. We just spoke to how you use it in your own creative workflow. Do you think AI is changing the definition of creativity itself?
For me, it is. I have created AI songs with my daughter. We create AI images with characters that she references all the time. I would never have done something that creative or that kind of creative because I'm not an artist, I'm not a song maker, but now I can be.
Yeah.
I can teach my daughter that, she can be interested in and dabble in a lot of things. I think that's what's been really exciting for me. I feel like I'm always curious about the world and learning new skills and different things. And so for me, it gives me an opportunity to just sort of like dabble in these things or learn about something that, I was worried would take me too much time, but now, oh, look, I can do a deep research report on, what it would be like to move to Spain. Like, okay, like that will take a lot of time. So I think it's definitely changing what creativity means to me and making me a more kind of Renaissance woman in this new modern age of AI.
What a great place to end. As promised. Thank you, Nicole, for coming on Just Curious and sharing your perspectives and thoughts. And yeah, I really appreciate it.
Enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.